Jeff, it's still April, but we are into full swing of planting season. How is it developing?
You know what, it's really interesting, Doug. It's always fun this time of year to see the tractors out in the field. And you know, it really depends upon where you're at in the nation. You know, the last report that came out last Monday had us actually 9% complete on corn. That's a little bit behind the average. Five-year average is about 13. However, it is ahead of last year in which we were at 6%. But it depends on where you are, how things are going. Eastern Corn Belt, it's slow. Ohio River Valley, Ohio, Indiana, northern part of the Delta, the Boot Hill, Missouri, you know, they've been waterlogged and they need some time to dry out and before they can get going. And there's a little bit of concern in the market. It stuck its head up just a little bit today about, you know, are we going to get all the corn acres planted that we think? But then you go to the northwest part of the Corn Belt and it's dry. North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, you know, they're just waiting for the temperatures to warm up a little bit and they'll be in full swing. Coming back here into Nebraska, if we get past this rain event that we have scheduled for this weekend and get the temperatures to warm up, you know, we're going to be planting in some pretty nice conditions.
So there's a bit of uncertainty in the market as to how that might progress.
Oh, there is. And what's also rather unique about this is the fund position. A lot of years when we come in, you know, the funds are kind of sitting right in the middle of the ground. They don't really want to stick their toe in, you know, to the bullish side or the bearish side. But this year they placed some pretty big bets. As a matter of fact, on the soybean side, they're short about 70,000 contracts of beans. That's a pretty big short. It's nearing a record. On the corn, prior to today's trade, they were short about 47,000 contracts. So they're actually kind of leaning on this market a little bit, which could make it interesting with some uncertainty that we have here in the weather.
So they looked at those planting intentions and really took them to heart then, so to speak.
Yes, they did. They definitely did. And long term, they're probably going to be right. In the short term, you know what? Mother Nature's here and it'll kind of rule for a while.
Another thing that's probably affecting our markets, Jeff, is the dollar and the value of the dollar. I did some checking compared to in Brazil, and the U.S. dollar compared to the real is about 40% up since last year. Is that having an impact on our markets?
You know what it is. It's always, you know, we rely so heavily on the exports and the beans, and they're a very important part. And Brazil and Argentina, as a result of that, you know, they're being very, very competitive. The other thing we have going on a little bit here in the U.S., and the farmers changed his selling patterns a little bit. And what that's caused us to do is we got a little bit stronger basis than what we normally have. So we've got our prices a little bit higher than what we'd like to see. And then we counter that with South American being a little cheaper. We're still getting some exports, but they definitely are starting to switch and go south.
And the truckers' strike situation, what's happening there?
You know what, it's been kind of an on again, off again thing all kind of, you know, in through the winter and into the early spring. The trucker strikes fired up a little bit. There's only about 13 incidents today, you know, in the region, the different provinces. Most of it's centered in Mato Grosso. The police were able to get those cleared out pretty quick. We don't think it's going to have a real big impact on the market. Not anything like what the earlier ones did.
What about the bird flu here? Is that going to decrease our demand on our feed grains?
You know, and that's what's interesting right now is everybody's sitting there and looking at that and wondering, is that going to turn into another PED like we had in the hog side? And we don't think so. Our information would indicate to us that it's really setting up a lot like what the migratory path has been on the birds. You know, we saw some earlier in the southern states. Minnesota had been kind of the latest area in which a lot of those reports had shown up. Up in Minnesota, though, most of that's happening in turkeys. So, you know, so far it's stayed away really from our broilers.
So the bottom line, Jeff, as far putting all these factors together, what do you recommend in terms of the 15 crop?
Yeah, right now in the 15 crop, what I'd really recommend is get your finger on the trigger. And if we go ahead and see a little bit of a bounce in your markets, which we really could see because of the weather that we have, there's enough uncertainty that could happen. I'd be getting some sales on the books. We're pretty heavily sold, and it's really just because we want to make sure that this becomes another profitable year for guys.
Corn and beans both you're talking about?
Corn and beans both.
And what about if the old crop? There's still a lot of that out there in the farms, isn't there?
There is. I'd be getting down on the last amount of bushels of that. You know, if they've got 25% left or so, that's probably okay.
All in all, hopefully it'll be a good year again.
I hope so.